The exact year Americans lost the ability to buy houses. Data will make you angry. What if I told you there was an exact year when the American dream died? Not gradually, not slowly over time, but in one specific year when buying a house went from challenging but possible to mathematically impossible for most Americans? I'm American economic nostalgia, and after weeks of digging through housing data, wage records, and economic reports, I found it. The exact year when Americans lost the ability to buy houses. And the data isn't just shocking, it's going to make you furious. If you watched my videos about what $20 and $100 could buy in previous decades, you know I don't just throw around claims. I show you the numbers. The cold, hard, devastating numbers that explain why your life is harder than your parents' life. But this video is different. This isn't about groceries or gas. This is about the cornerstone of American prosperity, homeownership. And what I discovered will explain why you're paying $2,000 in rent for an apartment your parents could have bought for $20,000. Today, I'm going to show you exactly when the math stopped working. When wages and house prices diverged so dramatically that an entire generation got locked out of homeownership. And I'll show you who's responsible and why it's never going to get better. I've got mortgage calculators, inflation adjusters, wage data going back to 1940, and house price records from every major American city. The patterns are undeniable. The conclusions are devastating. But before we start, I need to warn you. Some of you are going to get angry. Really angry. Because you're going to realize just how badly your generation got screwed, and how the system was designed to keep you renting forever. So if you're ready to learn why you can't afford the house your grandparents bought on a single income, let's dive into the data that will change how you see American housing forever. Let's start with the era when buying a house was actually possible. Not easy possible. The period from 1945 to 1970, when the American dream wasn't a cruel joke. The numbers that will shock you. 1950 housing reality. Average house price, $7,354. Average annual income, $2,992. A house-to-income ratio, 2.5 to 1. Mortgage payment, about 14% of monthly income. Let me repeat that. In 1950, the average house cost 2.5 times the average annual salary. Today, that ratio is over 8 to 1 in most cities, and in places like California, it's 12 to 1. 1960, still manageable. Average house price, $11,900. Average annual income, $4,007. House-to-income ratio, 2.97 to 1. A down payment needed, $1,190, about 4 months of salary. Think about this. In 1960, a factory worker could save for 4 months and have a down payment for a house. Today, a factory worker would need to save for 4 years to have a down payment in most American cities. A single breadwinner could buy a house, support a family, own a car, take vacations, and still save money. This wasn't the luxury class. This was normal, working-class America. 1970, the last good year. Average house price, $17,000. Average annual income, $6,186. House-to-income ratio, 2.75 to 1. Mortgage rate, 8.5%, high, but offset by low prices. 1970 was the last year when buying a house followed the old rules. The last year when a young couple could realistically expect to own their own home within a few years of getting married. After 1970, everything changed. And I mean everything. The turning point, 1971 to 1978, when the system broke. Now we get to the meat of this story. The period when American housing went from affordable to impossible. And it didn't happen gradually. It happened in one devastating decade. 1973, the first crack. Average house price, $28,900, up 70% from 1970. Average annual income, $7,580, up only 22% from 1970. House-to-income ratio, 3.8 to 1. Do you see what happened? House prices exploded upward while wages crawled. For the first time in American history, houses were getting more expensive faster than people were getting raises. The 1973 oil crisis didn't just affect gas prices. It triggered inflation that made everything more expensive, including construction materials. But here's what's really insidious. Wages didn't keep up with housing inflation. 1975, the point of no return. Average house price, $35,900. Average annual income, $8,630. House-to-income ratio, 4.16 to 1. Mortgage rates, 9.5%. This is when buying a house stopped being normal for young Americans. When it went from, I'll buy a house when I get married, to maybe I'll buy a house when I'm 35. 1978, the exact year the dream died. Average house price, $48,800. Average annual income, $10,556. House-to-income ratio, 4.62 to 1. Mortgage rates, 9.64%. Here it is, 1978, the exact year when the math stopped working for most Americans. The calculation that ended the American dream. In 1978, the median house payment became 28% of the median income after you put 20% down. Before 1978, it was always under 25%. After 1978, it never went back under 25%. 1978 was when an entire generation of Americans got locked out of homeownership. Not because they weren't working hard enough, not because they weren't responsible enough, but because the math simply didn't work anymore. The Reagan era, 1980 to 1989, when greed became good. The 1980s were supposed to be the decade of prosperity. Morning in America. Economic growth. The rising tide lifting all boats. For homeowners, it was fantastic. For renters trying to become homeowners, it was a nightmare. 1980, mortgage rates from hell. Average house price, $62,200. Average annual income, $12,530. House-to-income ratio, 4.96 to 1. Mortgage rates, 13.74%. 13.74%. Imagine trying to buy a house today with a 14% mortgage rate. But here's what's even crazier. Even with those insane rates, houses kept getting more expensive relative to income. Everyone talks about the Reagan boom. GDP grew. The stock market soared. But for regular Americans trying to buy houses, the 1980s were when homeownership became a luxury item. 1985, the speculation begins. Average house price, $84,300. Average annual income, $16,822. House-to-income ratio, 5.01 to 1. Mortgage rates, 12.43%. This is when housing stopped being about shelter and started being about investment. When people started talking about houses appreciating instead of just being places to live. The psychological shift. Before 1980, you bought a house to live in it. After 1980, you bought a house because real estate always goes up. This shift from shelter to investment changed everything. 1989, the new normal. Average house price, $120,000. Average annual income, $20,099. House-to-income ratio, 5.97 to 1. By 1989, houses cost 6 times the average income. We had gone from 2.5x in 1950 to 6x in 1989. The American dream hadn't just gotten harder. It had become mathematically impossible for half of all Americans. The Clinton years, 1990 to 2000, the tech boom that didn't help. The 1990s were supposed to fix everything. The internet boom, economic expansion, rising wages. Surely this would make houses affordable again? Nope. It made everything worse. 1990, post-recession reality. Average house price, $122,900. Average annual income, $21,027. House-to-income ratio, 5.84 to 1. The recession actually made ratios slightly better, but not because houses got cheaper, because people got poorer. Everyone points to the tech boom as proof that the 1990s were great for workers. And if you worked in tech, they were. But for everyone else, houses kept getting more expensive while wages stayed flat. 1995, the internet revolution that bypassed housing. Average house price, $158,700. Average annual income, $26,492. House-to-income ratio, 5.99 to 1. We invented the internet, revolutionized communication, created entirely new industries. And houses still cost 6 times what people made annually. The credit card solution. This is when Americans started using credit cards to bridge the gap between what they earned and what life cost. Can't afford a house? Put the down payment on a credit card. Can't afford the mortgage? Use credit cards for everything else. 2000, the dot-com peak. Average house price, $207,000. Average annual income, $30,846. House-to-income ratio, 6.71 to 1. By 2000, we had reached a house-to-income ratio that would have been considered impossible in 1970. And we were just getting started. The psychological damage. This is when starter homes disappeared from the American vocabulary. When young couples stopped talking about buying houses and started talking about, maybe someday, buying houses. The bubble years, 2001 to 2007, when everything went insane. If you think housing was expensive in 2000, wait until you see what happened in the 2000s. This is when housing prices left Earth's atmosphere and entered a parallel universe where math didn't exist. 2001. Post-dot-com desperation. The dot-com crash should have made houses cheaper. Instead, the Federal Reserve dropped interest rates to historic lows, making it cheaper to borrow money for houses. Result: houses got even more expensive. The easy credit insanity. This is when banks started giving mortgages to anyone with a pulse. No income verification. No down payment required. Interest-only loans. Adjustable rate mortgages that started at 1%. 2003, the acceleration. Average house price, $246,300. Average annual income, $32,678. House-to-income ratio, 7.54 to 1. 7.5 times annual income. We had nearly tripled the house-to-income ratio from 1950. And people were still buying because real estate always goes up. The flipping frenzy. This is when regular people started flipping houses. When everyone became a real estate investor. When houses stopped being homes and became lottery tickets. 2005, peak insanity. Average house price, $297,000. Average annual income, $34,586. House-to-income ratio, 8.59 to 1. 8.5 times annual income. In some markets, houses cost 10, 12, even 15 times what people made annually. And people were still buying with no money down and interest-only payments. The media cheerleading, remember the TV shows? Flip This House, Property Ladder. The entire culture celebrated housing speculation while ignoring that normal people couldn't afford normal houses. 2007, the peak of the bubble. Average house price, $313,600. Average annual income, $36,035. House-to-income ratio, 8.7 to 1. This was it, the absolute peak of housing insanity. Houses cost almost 9 times what people made, and everyone thought it was sustainable. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The crash, 2008 to 2012, when reality hit. 2008, the year the music stopped. The year Americans learned that real estate doesn't always go up. The year millions of people lost their homes, their savings, and their faith in the American dream. 2008, the beginning of the end. Average house price, $292,600, down 6.7% from peak. Average annual income, $36,424. House-to-income ratio, 8.03 to 1. But here's what's crucial. Even after the crash, houses were still 8 times annual income. Even after the worst housing crash since the Great Depression, houses were still 3 times more expensive relative to income than they were in 1950. Over 10 million Americans lost their homes between 2008 and 2014. Entire neighborhoods became ghost towns. The American dream didn't just die, it was murdered. 2010, the bottom that wasn't really the bottom. Average house price, $272,900. Average annual income, $38,337. House-to-income ratio, 7.12 to 1. Even at the absolute bottom of the worst housing crash in modern history, houses still cost more than 7 times annual income. The crash brought us back to 2003 levels. Wall Street got bailed out. Banks got bailed out. Homeowners, they got foreclosed on. 2012, the false dawn. Average house price, $289,500. Average annual income, $42,693. House-to-income ratio, 6.78 to 1. The economy recovered. The stock market soared. House prices started climbing again. But wages? Wages stayed flat. This is when we should have learned our lesson. This is when we should have said never again. Instead, we did it all over again. The new bubble, 2013 to 2023, worse than before. If you think the 2000s housing bubble was bad, wait until you see what happened after 2013. We took everything that caused the first bubble and did it again, but worse. 2013, the recovery begins. Average house price, $322,100. Average annual income, $44,321. House-to-income ratio, 7.27 to 1. The recovery was underway. House prices were climbing again, and everyone pretended this was good news. This time, it wasn't just regular people speculating on houses. Wall Street firms started buying thousands of single-family homes to rent out. BlackRock, Invitation Homes, American Homes for Rent, they turned housing into a Wall Street commodity. 2015, the acceleration. Average house price, $367,500. Average annual income, $48,098. House-to-income ratio, 7.64 to 1. While wages crawled upward, house prices sprinted. The gap was widening again. And this time, there was no easy credit to mask the problem. The tech boom that made everything worse. Tech workers in San Francisco and Seattle were making $200,000 plus per year and paying $1.5 million for 1,200 square foot condos. Their high wages pushed up housing prices for everyone else, but everyone else wasn't making tech wages. 2018, beyond bubble territory. Average house price, $425,200. Average annual income, $54,441. House-to-income ratio, 7.81 to 1. We had exceeded the 2007 bubble peak in terms of house-to-income ratio. And this time, there was no easy credit to explain it away. 2020 breaks everything, then pandemic happened. And instead of making houses more affordable, it made everything insane. The pandemic, work from home meant people could live anywhere. Cities emptied out. Suburban houses became scarce. The Federal Reserve dropped interest rates to zero. Result, the biggest housing bubble in American history. 2021, peak insanity returns. Average house price, $511,100. Average annual income, $58,214. House-to-income ratio, 8.78 to 1. We had done it again. House prices were nearly 9 times annual income. We had learned nothing from 2008. 2023, where we are today. Average house price, $547,600. Average annual income, $70,084. House-to-income ratio, 7.81 to 1. Today, in 2023, houses cost nearly 8 times what people make annually. That's more than triple the ratio from 1950. And we're supposed to pretend this is normal. The mathematical impossibility. Why you can't afford a house. Let me show you exactly why you can't afford a house. Not with feel-good platitudes or personal responsibility lectures, but with cold, hard math. The 1950 homebuyer. House, $7,354. Annual income, $2,992. A down payment, 20%, $1,471. 5.9 months of salary. Monthly payment, $58, 14% of monthly income. The 2023 homebuyer. House, $547,600. Annual income, $70,084. A down payment, 20%, $109,520. 18.7 months of salary. Monthly payment, $3,200, 55% of monthly income. In 1950, you needed to save for 6 months to afford a down payment. Today, you need to save for 19 months. And that's assuming you can save every penny you earn, which is impossible because you're paying rent. The rent trap. Here's the cruelest joke of all. You can't save for a house because rent is too expensive. But rent is expensive because houses are expensive. You're trapped in a system designed to keep you renting forever. The wage stagnation. Just get a better job, they say. But look at the numbers. 1970 minimum wage, $1.60, equivalent to $11.85 today. 2023 minimum wage, $7.25. Real purchasing power, down 39%. Even skilled workers haven't kept up. 1980 median household income, $17,710, equivalent to $64,500 today. 2023 median household income, $70,084. A real wage growth, 8.7% over 43 years. Wages have grown 8.7% in 43 years. House prices have grown 400% in the same period. The math doesn't work. It can't work. Your parents bought houses when they cost 3 times annual income. You're trying to buy houses that cost 8 times annual income, with wages that have barely grown in real terms. This isn't a market failure. This isn't a temporary problem. This is systematic wealth transfer from young people to old people, from renters to homeowners, from workers to investors. Who's responsible? The villains of the housing crisis. You want to know who's responsible for destroying housing affordability in America? I'll tell you exactly who and how they did it. The Federal Reserve. Every time the economy got shaky, the Fed dropped interest rates. Lower rates meant cheaper mortgages. Cheaper mortgages meant higher house prices. They chose to inflate housing bubbles instead of letting prices find their natural level. Wall Street. They securitized mortgages, turning housing into a global commodity. They created synthetic derivatives based on housing. They turned your neighborhood into a line item on a balance sheet. Local governments. They restricted housing supply through zoning laws, building permits, and NIMBY regulations. They made it illegal to build affordable housing in most American cities. Real estate industry. They convinced everyone that real estate always goes up and that houses are investments instead of shelter. They turned buying a home into speculation. Both political parties. Republicans deregulated finance and let Wall Street run wild. Democrats pushed homeownership policies that inflated demand without increasing supply. Neither party ever addressed the fundamental supply and demand imbalance. They all got rich while you got locked out. They all benefited while you pay 50% of your income in rent for a place you'll never own. The current enablers. Institutional investors buying up single-family homes. Airbnb hosts removing rental stock from the market. Foreign investors parking money in American real estate. NIMBYs blocking new construction. Politicians who own multiple investment properties. The system is working exactly as designed. It's designed to keep you renting, keep you poor, and keep the people who already own property getting richer. So there you have it. The exact year Americans lost the ability to buy houses, 1978. That's when the house-to-income ratio permanently broke. That's when the American dream died for everyone who wasn't already wealthy. From 1945 to 1978, houses cost 2.5 to 3 times annual income. From 1978 to today, they've cost 5 to 9 times annual income. An entire generation got locked out, and we pretend it's their fault for not working hard enough. The systemic nature. This isn't about personal responsibility. This isn't about avocado toast or lattes. This is about a systematic transfer of wealth from young to old, from renters to owners, from workers to investors. The numbers don't lie. The data is crystal clear. Housing became unaffordable not because of individual failures, but because of policy choices that benefited people who already owned assets. Today's young Americans face an impossible choice. Pay 50% of your income in rent, or pay 60% of your income for a mortgage on a house that's overpriced by historical standards. Either way, you're house poor. Either way, you can't build wealth. But knowledge is power. Understanding why you can't afford a house is the first step toward fixing the system that keeps you locked out. If this video made you angry, good. You should be angry. Share this data with everyone you know. Make people understand that the housing crisis isn't a natural disaster. It's a policy choice. In the comments, tell me your housing story. What percentage of your income goes to rent? How long would you need to save for a down payment? Let's document the reality that mainstream media ignores. Next week, I'm going to show you what it would actually take to fix the housing crisis. Spoiler alert, it's possible, but it would require making some very rich people less rich. And they're not going to give up without a fight. Until then, remember, you're not failing the American dream. The American dream failed you. And the data proves it. Hit that like button if this video opened your eyes. Subscribe if you want more uncomfortable truths about American economics. And share this with anyone who's ever been told they can't afford a house because they're not trying hard enough. Because the truth, the system is rigged. But now you know exactly how, when, and why it was rigged. See you next week when we talk about solutions.